Hey everyone, and welcome back to the deep dive. Today, today we're going to be looking at self-defense laws in India.
Okay.
We're going to try to figure out when you're legally allowed to defend yourself, especially when it comes to using serious force.
Yeah.
And get this, we're not just going to be looking at the dry legal stuff.
Yeah.
We're also going to be pulling in information from Reddit discussions, from r/legal advice India and Wikipedia
Interesting.
to see what real people are worried about, what questions they have about this topic.
Yeah, it's like getting a glimpse into like the anxieties around personal safety and the laws,
Well,
And I think that's really important because, when people understand the legal realities, it can empower them to act confidently and responsibly.
so true.
Yeah.
Okay, let's jump into this. One thing that really stood out to me from the Reddit discussions is just how many questions people have about what they can and can't do if they're threatened.
Right.
Like, let's say you're at home and someone breaks in
Okay.
and they have a weapon. Do you have to wait for them to attack you before you can do anything?
That's a great question, and it reveals a very common misconception. A lot of people think that they have to allow an attacker to strike first before they can defend themselves.
Oh, really?
But Indian law, it actually recognizes something called reasonable apprehension of harm.
Okay, so it's not about an actual attack, but the threat of an attack.
Yeah, exactly.
Like if a reasonable person would feel threatened in that situation,
Exactly.
they don't have to wait.
It's not just about feeling scared, right?
Yeah.
It's about a credible and immediate threat to your safety.
Right.
So if someone's, waving a knife in your face and yelling threats at you, that's obviously a clear example.
Okay, that makes sense. But I saw another Reddit user asked, what if you're defending yourself and you accidentally hurt the attacker more than you meant to?
Hmm.
Like, say your aim is off or you just panic in the moment.
Right,
People are really worried about that.
of course.
What happens then?
And, rightfully so. The law does acknowledge that, in these high-stress situations, you might not react perfectly.
Right.
And that's where this principle of proportionate force comes into play.
Okay.
It means that the force that you use to defend yourself has to match the level of the threat.
So you're saying it's like you can't use a sledgehammer to swat a fly.
Exactly.
Okay.
You need to choose a response that will stop the threat without using excessive force.
Right.
So think about it this way, right? Like using a cricket bat against an unarmed attacker might be deemed excessive, whereas using pepper spray might be totally justified.
Okay.
It's all about finding that balance.
That's a really helpful way to think about it.
Yeah.
So we've got these principles of reasonable apprehension and proportionate force.
Right.
But now I kind of want to get into the actual legal definitions here.
Sure.
We found this document, the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita 2023, which lays out the whole Indian legal framework
Okay.
when it comes to self-defense.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to hear your take on this.
Yeah. So Section 34 of this document states things done in private defense.
Sounds pretty formal.
Very formal, right?
Yeah.
But what does that actually mean for someone who's, trying to understand their rights?
Right.
Well, it basically says that you are allowed to protect yourself,
Yeah.
but it's not a free pass.
Okay.
There are rules about when and how you can use force.
Right.
Now, Section 35 gets into the right of private defense of the body and of property.
So hold on. There's a difference between defending yourself and defending your stuff.
Big difference.
Okay.
And then Section 38 dives even deeper, and it outlines when causing death is legally okay as self-defense.
Whoa. Okay. So when does the law actually say, yeah, you can use deadly force in this situation?
Yeah, so Section 38, it lists out these very specific scenarios, like if you're facing an assault that could reasonably cause death or grievous hurt,
Yeah.
like a really serious injury,
Right.
or if somebody is trying to rape or kidnap you,
Oh.
or wrongfully confine you in a way that makes it unlikely you could get help. In these types of situations, the law says that you can defend yourself even if it means using deadly force, as long as the threat is real and immediate.
That covers a lot of really serious situations.
Yeah.
But I saw this one comment on the Reddit thread that really stuck with me.
Okay.
Someone said, and I quote, correct me if I'm wrong though,
Uh-huh.
and they're basically confused about where the line is between acting in self-defense and actually committing an assault.
Yeah, that is a valid question, and that brings us to a really important distinction.
Okay.
While self-defense is a legal justification for using force, assault is a crime.
Got it.
So,
I'm not trying to hurt someone. I'm reacting to a threat.
exactly.
That's the difference.
Yeah. And the article, the fine line between self-defense and assault, it highlights that the key difference is the intention.
Okay.
Assault involves a deliberate intent to cause harm,
Right.
whereas self-defense is about protecting yourself from immediate danger.
Got it.
So you can't just go around punching people and yelling, self-defense!
Right.
And this is where that concept of imminent threat comes back in.
Right.
The danger that you're facing has to be real, and it has to be happening right now.
Okay.
It can't be some potential threat in the future.
Right.
You have to genuinely believe that you or somebody else is in immediate danger of being harmed.
So it's not about just feeling vaguely uneasy. It's about a clear and present danger.
Right.
Okay.
And even then, you still have to use proportionate force.
Right, right.
Remember the sledgehammer and the fly?
Ha ha ha. I'm never going to forget that analogy.
Good.
Okay, so what about defending someone else?
Oh, yeah.
Is that even allowed under Indian law?
Absolutely. So the Wikipedia article on self-defense, it actually refers to this as defense of others or alter ego defense.
Okay.
And good news, Indian law allows you to defend other people even if you don't know them personally.
Oh, wow. So let's say I'm walking down the street and I see someone being attacked.
Okay.
I wouldn't be breaking the law by, like, stepping in to help.
Not necessarily. So
Yeah.
if you believe, and this is based on what a reasonable person would think.
Right.
In that situation, that the victim is in immediate danger, you have the right to intervene and use force to protect them.
Wow, that's really reassuring to know.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm guessing those same principles of reasonable apprehension and proportionate force still apply, right?
Absolutely. Just because you're defending somebody else, it doesn't give you a free pass to use excessive force.
Okay.
You still need to act reasonably and proportionally to the threat.
This is all really important information for everyone to know.
Yeah.
But I imagine there's still a lot to consider, like what happens after a self-defense incident.
Right.
So that's something we're going to get into right after a quick break.
That was good.
Okay.
Cool.
So we've talked a lot about when you're actually legally allowed to defend yourself in India,
Right.
but I'm curious what happens after a self-defense incident.
Oh, that's a great question.
That seems to be something that people on Reddit are really concerned about.
Yeah, you're right. The aftermath of a self-defense incident can be tricky.
Okay.
But the first thing to remember is that reporting the incident to the police is absolutely crucial.
Even if you feel like you were totally justified in defending yourself.
Especially then. Reporting the incident helps establish that you acted in self-defense.
Right.
And that you weren't the aggressor.
Oh, okay.
It creates this official record of what happened.
Okay, that makes sense because I saw a comment from someone who was like, what if I kill someone in self-defense?
Yeah.
Will I go to jail? It's a heavy question.
Right.
And people are clearly worried about the legal consequences.
Of course. And it's understandable.
Yeah.
And while Indian law does recognize self-defense, it's important to understand that any use of deadly force is going to be thoroughly investigated.
So even if you believe you were acting legally, you could still face, like, scrutiny.
Yes, it's possible.
Right.
And that's why having a lawyer is so important.
Right.
A lawyer can help you navigate the legal process and make sure that your rights are protected.
This reminds me of something from that The Fine Line Between Self-Defense and Assault
Yeah.
article. It talked about the burden of proof in these cases. Can you
Yeah.
explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so in a self-defense case, the burden of proof is often on you, the person who used the force, to prove that your actions were justified.
Oh, so it's not enough to just say, hey, I felt threatened.
Right.
You need to actually prove it.
Exactly. You need evidence to back up your claim.
Okay.
This could be anything from witness statements to medical records to even like photos or videos of the scene.
Wow.
Anything that can corroborate your story.
So it's not just about reacting in the moment. It's also about being prepared for what comes after.
Absolutely. Documenting the incident, seeking medical attention if you need it, and getting a lawyer are all critical steps.
Okay. This is all starting to make a lot more sense.
Good.
Now, something I've been wondering about is the role of perception in all of this.
Okay.
Like, how does the law take into account that people might perceive threats differently?
That's a great question, and that gets to the heart of how reasonable apprehension works.
Okay.
The law acknowledges that perceptions of danger can vary.
So it's not just about like an objective threat, but also how a reasonable person in that specific situation would react.
Precisely, the law gets that people react differently under stress,
Right.
and it takes those individual circumstances into account.
Okay, but there have to be limits, right? Like, what if someone is just like overly anxious or sees threats everywhere?
Sure, and that's where the reasonable person standard comes in.
Okay.
The courts use this standard to kind of judge whether the level of fear and the actions that were taken were actually reasonable
Right.
in that specific situation.
So it's this balancing act between acknowledging like individual perceptions, but also applying some kind of objective standard.
Exactly. It's a very nuanced area of the law.
Okay.
And a lot of it really comes down to the specifics of each individual case.
This whole deep dive is really making me think. It's
Yeah.
like self-defense isn't just about knowing some physical moves, you
Yeah.
know?
Right.
It's about understanding your rights and the whole legal context.
I couldn't agree more. And it's not just about knowing your rights, but also exercising them responsibly.
Okay, so if our listener is taking away one thing from all of this,
Yeah.
what would you say is the most important point when it comes to defending themselves or others?
The key takeaway here is that understanding the legal framework surrounding self-defense is absolutely essential.
Right.
Knowing when you're legally justified to use force
Right.
and how much force is considered reasonable
Right.
could be the difference between protecting yourself and facing serious legal repercussions.
Yeah, it's like a little knowledge can be a really powerful tool in these situations.
Exactly. Knowing the law empowers you to act confidently and decisively while staying within the boundaries of the law.
Well said.
Yeah.
Okay, before we wrap up, I want to bring up one more thing from the Wikipedia article.
Okay.
It mentioned this concept called, I think it's son assault domain.
Close enough. Basically means his own first assault.
Okay.
And it can be used as a defense in court.
So is that like if someone is claiming that they were assaulted first and that their actions were just a response to that?
Right. So if you can prove that you were initially the victim of an assault, it can really strengthen your self-defense claim.
But I'm guessing it would depend on the details,
Right.
Like who actually started the physical contact.
Absolutely. Was there a verbal threat before things got physical?
Right.
What were the circumstances leading up to the use of force?
Okay.
All of those factors really matter.
It's amazing how many layers there are to these self-defense cases.
You're telling me. And it really underscores how important it is to have evidence and witnesses and a good lawyer on your side if you ever find yourself in this kind of situation.
Okay, well, we've covered a ton of ground today, from like what people are actually worried about
Yeah.
to the legal definitions
Yeah.
to like what happens after a self-defense incident.
Uh-huh.
And we even touched on some of the historical and philosophical ideas behind
Yeah.
self-defense,
Mm-hmm.
which is pretty fascinating.
It is.
But I think it's time to bring this deep dive in for a landing.
I agree, and I think our listener is walking away with a much better understanding of how self-defense works in India.
I hope so. But before we go, I have one final thought-provoking question to leave everyone with. We've been talking about all these legal definitions and what's considered reasonable,
Right.
But something I've been thinking about is how do things like personal biases play into all this?
Hmm.
Like, could someone's perception of a threat be influenced by, say, the other person's appearance or background?
That's a really insightful question, and it highlights a really important point. While the law aims to be objective,
Right.
we can't ignore the reality that human biases exist.
Right. Like, even if a judge or jury is trying to be fair,
Uh-huh.
their own unconscious biases could affect how they see a situation.
Exactly. It's a reminder that self-defense cases aren't just about knowing the letter of the law.
Right.
They're also about understanding the social context
Hmm.
in which those laws are applied.
Wow, that adds like a whole other layer of complexity to this.
It does, and it's something to keep in mind, not just in legal situations, but even in everyday life.
Right.
How we perceive each other and how we react to situations can be influenced by factors that we're not even aware of.
That's a lot to think about.
It is.
But I think that's what makes these deep dives so valuable.
Yeah.
It's about giving people the information to think critically
Yeah,
about these complex issues.
absolutely. And I hope our listeners are walking away from this not just feeling informed,
Right.
but also empowered to question assumptions and look at things from different perspectives.
Well said. And as always, if you're ever in a real-life situation and need legal advice, talk to a professional.
Right.
We're just two people having a conversation here, not giving legal counsel.
Exactly. This deep dive is for informational purposes only.
Right.
Always consult with a lawyer if you need specific legal guidance.
Okay, so with that disclaimer out of the way,
Yeah.
I think we've successfully navigated the often murky waters of self-defense law in India.
I think so. We covered a lot of ground.
We sure did. And hopefully our listener is feeling a bit more knowledgeable and prepared to navigate these complex situations.
I hope so, too. It's a topic that everyone should be aware of.
For sure. All right, everyone, that's a wrap on this episode of The Deep Dive. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe out there.
Yeah. Take care.